transfer portal's popping, dude. Let's start with Colorado. Obviously, we all wonder what's it going to look like without Shedeur Sanders. He's off to the NFL, projected top 10 pick. Julian Lewis, guy highly touted out of Carrollton High School. If you've been following us at 24/7 Sports, you know that's a name that we are very familiar with. Kaidon Salter is the guy, though. It looks like Deion Sanders is going to tab out of the transfer portal. That news just came from Matt Zenitz. Spent a couple years at Liberty, highly touted guy, recruited to Tennessee. I think this is a pretty good fit. But, Tom, I want to ask you from the high school side of things. I mean, how do you think it marries up with the timeline of Julian Lewis?
It's going to be pretty interesting. That's going to be a really good battle. I like the fit for Kaidon Salter, and I actually think this could actually benefit Julian Lewis a lot as soon as he gets there and those guys compete. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for both. I don't think that Kaidon Salter was assured he's going to be QB1 upon arrival. I have a pretty good feeling that Julian Lewis had a pretty strong feeling that he was going to be the guy. So whether there was discussions about the portal, I think you have to assume every school is going to go that route. So you got to know there's going to be some competition in that room. But I think that he's going to push Julian to be better and vice versa. Julian is advanced. He's polished. He's extremely strong mentally. I think the back and forth is going to be fun to watch. But it's going to be a really good battle spring into summer and into the fall camp. So I actually really like this fit, and I think it's going to push both of them.
Kaidon Salter, top 100 prospect, number 11 quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports. Obviously a guy that I think the ideal bridge quarterback. So there'll be a lot of talk on that with Kaidon Salter, how he fits in Deion Sanders, Pat Shurmur's offense, and we'll see what that looks like. Guys, like I said, we appreciate you joining us as always. You can find us on X and on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. And like I said, that portal's popping. Another name that jumped in there today, Patrick Payton. Talk about a guy that is uber productive, the edge out of Florida State, leaned into the portal last year, came back. He's got 16 career sacks. He makes his debut as a number 2 player in the portal, so obviously some big names still coming off the board as well. Speaking of big names, let's talk about USC, man. Missing a lot of production here. Zachariah Branch, the former 5-star, one of the best players in the country, one of the best players in the portal, top 5 at his position. He jumps in there along with Deuce Robinson, another guy that they had high hopes for. All of a sudden, Tom, you're looking at USC. It's been a rough couple days. You could say it's been a rough couple weeks for Lincoln Riley. They lose 3 of their top 5 receivers. That's over 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns as well. And I didn't even mention Kyron Hudson to that piece of the puzzle as well. I don't know, just from where you're sitting, what's your kind of pulse on USC? And, we talked a lot about them on the high school side of things as well, and where kind of Lincoln Riley sits going into a pivotal year next year.
Yeah, I think this was a tough one for USC. I think losing Zachariah Branch, who's a lifelong diehard fan of USC, and obviously his brother Zion Branch as well. And obviously they're going to end up at the same school. They're going to team up. And for me, when I was looking at this initially, the first thought popped in my head, because I do know how close him and Miller Moss are. I thought, hey, maybe they're going to take this connection from USC to Louisville. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the Cardinals here. There's some chatter that maybe that's just not going to be the right fit for Branch, and he's going to look elsewhere. Keeping an eye on Georgia. Chris Hummer's been all over this one early. We've only had about 24 hours to really find out where Zachariah and Zion are going to go. Georgia's definitely a school that we're watching, but I feel like that marriage at Louisville would be pretty special for them. Deuce Robinson can go pretty much anywhere he wants. It seems like everybody's pushing really hard, and nothing's really done there. But kind of just going back to Louisville, I think that Louisville's going to do what they can to make a run at a couple of those guys leaving USC, because they do want to make sure that Miller's well taken care of with guys around him, because I think they have a chance to be really special as a group next year.
Do not contact tag for Zachariah Branch, which is kind of fascinating. Georgia seems to be the team right now, at least. Has the most buzz around him when you talk to Chris Hummer and Matt Zenitz. We'll see what happens. I'm sure Mario Cristobal, Miami, trying to get in there as well, along with a couple other teams. And Louisville's not one of those teams to sleep on. I mean, they're well equipped, especially financially.
It will take care of you
from an NIL standpoint. So we'll see what happens with Zachariah Branch. I think the other wrinkle there is that he wants to play with his brother, Zion Branch, who was a former top 247 safety as well. We'll see which one of those schools would be comfortable pairing those two guys together. Remember, scholarship limit goes from 85 to 105, so that makes it a little bit easier to absorb a package deal like that. So we'll see what happens there. The guy at the top of the board, John Mateer, quarterback from Washington State, we've been monitoring this one for a while. It's been tough up there in Pullman, man. You think about Jake Dickert, he's off to Wake Forest today as Clausen leaves there. Now you think about Mateer, consecutive years, man. You're losing 2 of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. First it was Cam Ward, now it's Mateer. You think about the schools involved here. Oklahoma seems to be the team right now, and they absolutely have to have them. Ben Arbuckle, his offensive coordinator. Miami seems to be the other team, obviously with the connection to Cam Ward, trying to get involved. But it does seem at this point that there is a clear favorite. That being said, we know that anything can happen. John Mateer, man, I think obviously the number one player in the portal for a reason, the most dynamic guy. Oklahoma's got to have this dude.
He kind of fires me up. I had not seen much about him until you guys slapped that number one ranking on him. And the more I looked into it, I don't know. There's a lot to like there. And I think he could have a monster season if he picks Oklahoma and kind of keeps that thing rolling with his OC. But again, I kind of initially, we talked about this a little bit at Wake this morning. I brought up Wake Forest. Obviously, the head coach leaves and he's talking about how he's the best quarterback and best player in college football. And then all of a sudden he's at Wake Forest now. Do you see that as a possible fit? Do you think they could make a move there? And obviously, if you think that marriage would be a good one,
I think that would be that'd be the wild card of the wild card if Wake Forest was able to get the number one player in the country. I think Oklahoma's got their hooks in here. Is kind of what it feels like in terms of the offensive coordinator. Here's the thing, though: Nic Anderson, their leading receiver from 2 years ago, just left, signed with LSU. You think about Oklahoma, their receiving corps, they're decimated by injuries last year. Whole new offensive line. So if you're Mateer right now and you're out there and you're an Oklahoma fan or you're a Miami fan, you're trying to figure out, all right, where's this guy going? What situation is more appealing? You know, you got Francis Mauigoa coming back at tackle for Miami. They have some pieces. They lost Isaiah Horton as well. Miami trying to do some things offensively. They went out. They got C.J. Daniels from LSU. But if you're John Mateer, you got 1 year to kind of or 1 or 2 years to kind of put this whole thing together. What's the more appealing place? I don't know. And quite honestly, I don't know if there's a clear favorite there that's like, if I'm John Mateer, you're saying, all right, this place is prime, ready to go. The continuity with Ben Arbuckle, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's probably where the advantage is right now.
I think that makes the most sense. And if you take money off the table, I think that is the easiest, smoothest transition. But I will say, obviously, the proof is in the pudding. What Miami did this year with Cam Ward, what he could do next year, there's going to be talent, there's going to be speed around him. If I was advising him, I think Miami would be the pick. But again, that's taking off all money off the table and obviously coaching fits because he's obviously going to have a comfort level with the OC.
There's a lot of money on the table.
Sure.
money is on the table right now in the transfer portal. The other thing about Mateer, the dual threat capability. So when you talk about an offensive line that's maybe rebuilding like Oklahoma, the legs are so important. 3,100 yards through the air, another 800 on the ground. He had 15 touchdowns on the ground as well, 44 touchdowns. This guy's a pocket rocket. He's a lot of fun. Just in terms of the dynamic that he is able to bring, he might be worth 2 or 3 more wins for whatever team is out there. Maybe it's Oklahoma, maybe it's Miami, maybe there's another team out there that we're discounting as well. Speaking of quarterbacks, I think when people look at the quarterback rankings for 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal, a lot of people are trying to figure out, all right, how do you kind of marry up projection and production? And John Mateer and Luke Kromenhoek are 2 great examples of guys that are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Kromenhoek was a guy that we had as a top 40 passer in the country coming out last year. He's got to play early. The Florida State situation is terrible. They win 2 or 3 games, whatever it was there. They go through DJ Uiagalelei. They go through Brock Glenn. And all of a sudden, it's freshman Luke Kromenhoek, who a couple years ago was playing safety, right? So this is fascinating. But he ends up at Mississippi State. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at Jeff Lebby, and it's like, Van Buren's gone. He's in the portal. He did some nice things. He ends up at LSU inside the conference. This is not a consolation prize, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Michael Van Buren. But if you're Mississippi State, coming off the year that you had, you lost Kevin Coleman, you lost Mario Craver. You're losing a lot of guys in the portal. They're also doing a good job getting those guys back. Luke Kromenhoek, it might not be the most talked about because the impact might not be so much short-term, but the long-term impact of this program, having a franchise signal caller for Mississippi State, I think is a huge, huge deal here.
I always get a little worried about guys that I don't think are completely ready to be day one guys. I think about the class, and I think about like a Julian Sayin or a CJ Carr. Those guys could have stepped in and been guys. I didn't see that with Luke Kromenhoek. But fast forwarding, I feel like the experience he got at Florida State is going to help him as long as he's not rattled mentally. And I love the fit with Jeff Lebby. So I think that pairing, he probably could have gone somewhere else and got a little bit more money, maybe found a better depth chart, whatever the case may be. I love the fit with Jeff Lebby. I think he's going to get the most out of him. I think he's going to get a ton out of him quicker than he would have gone elsewhere. If he was chasing the money or chasing a different fit, I love the marriage. I think that this is going to be really, really good for both parties moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot out there from the message board warriors about what was to be made about, Luke Kromenhoek's demands to stay at Florida State and what that looked like. And they bring in Gus Malzahn over from UCF, and they got a new OC. And then they go out and they get Thomas Castellanos. Like, if you're a Florida State fan, I think you have a legitimate question to say, hey, are we in better shape with Thomas Castellanos and Gus Malzahn than we were with a Kromenhoek, and maybe being aggressive in the portal and surrounding that guy? So we'll see what happens there. Big get for Mississippi State. They got their guy, their future. Another trend I think I want to talk about that I think we're on the tip of the spear here a little bit, but Jaylen Mbakwe, former 5-star, enters the portal a day or two later, withdraws from the portal. Amaris Williams, former 5-star as well. Freshman, both of these guys at Auburn, enters the portal, withdraws only a day later. I think this is just like hostile negotiating tactics. I mean, I think that's what it is at the end of the day. And in this day and age, I don't know if I really blame them, quite honestly. They probably both were well compensated for this move.
I think this is going to be a regular thing. Obviously, I'm not speaking regular. It's going to be 90%, but we're going to see this every cycle. We'll see it again in the spring portal. It's just going to be how it works from now on. They're going to reach out and say, "Look, I had a really good season." And I don't want to speak out of turn or anything, but like I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen a bigger name, and I don't want to speculate like a Ryan Williams. I knew see Twitter, all these fake accounts throwing things out there like he's transferring, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of these guys are going to feel that they deserve a little bit more than what they put on after putting up what they did on the field, and they're going to reach back out and say, "Hey, like if we can't get a little bit more here, I'm probably going to look elsewhere because I think I can get that." So we're going to see this a lot more often than not, and fans are going to hate it, coaches are going to hate it even more. But it's a business now, and that's really what they just want to be compensated for what they do, and I don't hate it like you said.
I think it's restricted free agency, right? I mean, the team, Alabama, Auburn, in this situation with Mbakwe and both Amaris Williams, they're going to have the right of first refusal. I think that's really kind of what it comes down to. Mbakwe supposedly was linked to Ole Miss. And if you're Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, you can't let a first-round talent, because that's what Mbakwe is. Even in the limited snaps that he played this year, you turn on the tape and you say, this guy's a potential first-round draft pick in Jaylen Mbakwe. You can't let him go, and you can't let him go to Ole Miss. That just cannot be done. So Alabama obviously having one of those moments where they got to regroup, find a way to keep this guy in the fold. And the same goes with Auburn. It's just funny, right? You always think, like, why is it always my team that has problems with? You're an Alabama fan, you can look at Auburn. And if you're an Auburn fan, you can look at Alabama. Everybody's got the same problems. So interesting to see there.
Just thinking out loud, like, is there a negative to this? Do you think there's ever going to be a point where the school is just like, all right, you want to enter the portal and bounce, play hardball? We're moving on. Like, do you see any negative for the player if we're talking elite, cream of the crop type kid?
Lack of continuity. I think we've seen this before with Bear Alexander. I think we've seen it with Julian Humphrey a little bit. They go to the well, they get a raise, and then they come back and say, hold on, if I was able to get the raise the first time, why wouldn't they do it again? And then they go back, and you look at Julian Humphrey, who I believe was in a similar situation, obviously gets benched for Daniel Harris. But I think that was one of those situations where he's leaving his team before the SEC championship. Those are all things, and I get it, in a player movement world that we're in now, you're not going to get dinged for it as much. But all these guys with that type of talent, a Humphrey, a Bear Alexander, they're all going to have to answer very tough questions when they go interview with these NFL teams, right? And it's a lot different there. So that's going to be the fascinating part. Yeah, I think the lack of continuity ultimately hurts. Now you got to go to a new place. You got to learn a new environment. You got new coaches. You got a new locker room. That's a lot, right? The biggest thing, I think, is access to the field development, and continuity really benefits these guys long-term as well. Moving down here, LSU, one of those teams I think we talked about, the last couple days before signing day, it was hard to kind of pin them. They lose Bryce Underwood. They lose Cade Phillips, who in his own right is probably one of the best corners in the country. He is, and a guy that, quite honestly, could be a 5-star at the end of the day. So you're looking at LSU. They did all this great work throughout the cycle. They lose those two. They go out there. They're able to hold on to DJ Pickett. They're able to flip Solomon Thomas from Florida State.
They lost Derek Meadows as well.
They lose Derek Meadows to Alabama. And you're like, if I'm an LSU fan, like, I'm so-so. I'm okay. It's not the worst case scenario. It's not the best. Probably somewhere in the middle. But if you fast forward and you say, all right, what do they need to do in the transfer portal to make me feel a lot better about this situation in the short term, the 2025 outlook? This would be it. I mean, they're doing it. You look at what LSU has been able to do. Nic Anderson, Berry, and Brown they get from Oklahoma and Kentucky. I didn't think receiver was an overwhelming need, but surrounding Garrett Nussmeier, who a lot of people think could be a day one guy if he comes back for another year, they're in good shape. Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma, what they've done defensively as well. Jakeem Jackson, Delane from Virginia Tech, Jack Pyburn from Florida. Dude, LSU right now, it's got a matchup on the field, but it's almost kind of like they looked up and it's like, all right, Bryce Underwood's moving on. Jakeem Stewart's going to USC. Well, we had a pot of gold allocated for each of these guys. Now, all of a sudden, you can kind of spread that wealth out over 4 or 5 potential starters.
I think the only person happier than Brian Kelly at this point is probably Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, what they did in the portal is tremendous. And you kind of go back, and we brought up Bryce Underwood. I think, yeah, it's a blow. He's an elite special talent, a guy that in the next couple of years could be the number 1 overall player in the country. But when you know you have Garrett Nussmeier back coming in, I think that's kind of it's okay. It's not a huge deal. You can find another guy that's an elite talent, but you got to land him next year because you got to keep it rolling. But in this day and age with the portal, as long as you land a top-tier quarterback, you're going to get guys around him. But what LSU's done this offseason, I was a little skeptical with them on the recruiting side of things, especially with Brian Kelly leading the show there. But what they've done in the portal has been phenomenal. If you're an LSU fan, you got to be fired up right now. You got guys coming in, difference makers, guys that are going to take Garrett Nussmeier for a guy that may be a fringe first-rounder to a surefire, in my opinion, first-rounder next year. I think he's going to have a monster season, and it really revolves around what they currently have, but also what they brought in with the portal.
Yeah, they're not done yet either. I mean, I think they're hunting for a starting tackle. You're probably looking at 2 bodies that they want to bring in. They want some competition at the tackle spot. The tackle from Washington State, guy that was banged up last year, I'm blanking on the name. It's a Polynesian name, and I don't want to butcher it out of respect to him. Yeah, where's Blair Angulo when you need him? But LSU right now not done, doing an impressive job. Yeah. We'll talk about some other teams doing an impressive job as well. But we got our first question from YouTube to Tom and Coop from Kanan Torres. Kanan, thank you as always for listening. He says, how would you like the fit for Isiah World at any of his top 3, A&M, Nebraska, and Oregon? Isiah World, one of the top tackles in the country. And a guy, if you talk to some NFL scouts, I mean, these guys are really, really high on this guy, and you can understand why. 6'8", over 330 pounds, from Nevada. He's raw. But what I'm learning about the tackle market is if you're big, you're long, you got functional athleticism and a pulse, you're going to get compensated, and it's going to be a very competitive market. So you mentioned those schools. I think Oregon just got a tackle from Texas State. I'm excited to dive into the tape there. But I think if you're Texas A&M or Nebraska, the other school linked to the tackle from Wazoo. Obviously, those are needy teams, but I think this is one of the best plug-and-play options. Is he perfect? No, but from what we see on the portal market, teams are doing a better job playing defense. This would be one of the best guys that you can absolutely get. Guys, like I said, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. If you're watching us on X, also make sure to like and retweet as well. Let's keep it going here. Colorado, man, they're not done. Jaheim Oatis, big interior defensive lineman, the number 1 defensive lineman in the country per 24/7 Sports, ranked him in the top 15. Had a great freshman year at Alabama. Obviously, things change. Kane Womack comes in, new defensive coordinator, kind of gets schemed out. Had some knee issues that I think maybe held some teams up a little bit. Now he's going to get the chance to go to Colorado, work with a Hall of Famer, Gold Jacket, and Warren Sapp. And if you're Colorado, we talk about it all the time. I mean, this is a team that's got an opportunity to win 10 games. Where do you get your beef from, right? We always talk about it with those West Coast schools. The opportunity to go pull a Jaheim Oatis, even with the other stuff, maybe, he's scared some teams off medically. You got to do it if you're Deion Sanders in Colorado. I love the aggressiveness here, and I like the fit as well.
I think if you're Colorado, you have nothing to lose here. And honestly, this is a perfect move for Jaheim Oatis. There's a need for him. He's going to be coached up at a high level because when this dude stays healthy, he is a bad man. So love the fit at Colorado. I think he's going to prove to be a difference maker as long as he stays healthy because his game is going to be taken up another notch with Warren Sapp leading the charge there.
All right, let's talk about a team that I don't think many of us expected to talk about, Texas Tech, man, and what they're doing. Joey McGuire, Mr. Blanchard there, the general manager. You look at Texas Tech, the season that they had this year, they are, let's call it penny for penny, probably one of the most aggressive teams in the transfer portal right now with what they've done. I got to take a look at the transfer portal rankings. They're changing by the minute, but a top 5 class And you think about these guys, Lee Hunter, they get from UCF, big body interior defensive lineman. Terrence Carter, they get out of Louisiana Lafayette, the tight end, one of my favorites. Bryce Pollock, they take from Mississippi State, the corner. Reggie Virgil from Miami, Ohio. Hunter Zambrano, the number one interior offensive lineman from us for Illinois State. And then maybe one of my favorite players in the entire portal, Cole Wisniewski, FCS All-American from North Dakota State. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine this morning. You know what's funny? I think we're getting to the point with the transfer portal where a lot of teams have done a really good job in terms of, getting it going from a financial standpoint. But who's the most aligned? Not only from a financial allocation standpoint, but from a talent identification standpoint. Who can match their board with their financial investment? You look at the top teams right now, you got to give a ton of credit to Ole Miss. They seem to be a year or two ahead of everybody when it comes to the portal. You look at LSU, what they've been able to do. Austin Thomas has been huge there. And then you think about Blanchard, Texas Tech, Joey McGuire. And I want to give a shout out to Blanchard because I don't know if there's anybody giving more autonomy in the front office in college football than him. They've been awesome, man. They've been complete nails. And all of a sudden you're looking at Texas Tech and you're like, wow, at least from the scouting standpoint, how those guys could elevate this team. All of a sudden, the Big 12 that's wide open, Texas Tech looks like a legit contender.
Blanchard's an impressive cat. Got to hear from him at the symposium and here in Nashville, and I get it. I see why he's so well thought of by not only coaches but recruits, prospects, players. Everybody raves about him. So Texas Tech's in good hands there. Joey McGuire wants to win now. Doesn't want to wait till April. Doesn't want to wait till any other portal period. He is trying to take advantage and land guys now, and he's killing it. Texas Tech, you nailed it. They're doing a great job. The guy that really pops for me is Lee Hunter. I think he's had a good career at UCF, super productive. He's an immediate impact guy, a guy that can help, and this team wants to win right away. So they're not going to settle for average at Texas Tech, which I appreciate. I know everybody was worried about losing Micah Hudson and things like that to A&M, but I think that they've had a really, really good portal season, and they're moving in the right direction. They're recruiting at a high level. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Very few schools evaluate like they do. And we always talk about guys that are maybe lower or kind of appear on the recruiting process because Texas Tech offered. And then all of a sudden, as they move on, all of a sudden he's got 30 offers, and he's a stock-up guy. So Texas Tech doing all the right things, kind of fired up about what they're going to do in the next couple of years. All
right, we're going to take a question here from Canes Cats, Heat 305. Guys, also stick around. We got Louisville quarterback Miller Moss joining us pretty soon. It says, question to both. When speaking to people, what does it take to land a free agent, meaning a player that will make an instant impact versus someone who is providing depth as a filler? Canes Cats hinted in his name that he's probably talking about Miami here. I think this comes down to financial compensation. It's been so interesting. We've been talking about North Carolina and why the fit might work with Bill Belichick is because the game right now, from a transactional standpoint, has never been more black and white. Now you got the revenue share coming down the pipe, and you're talking about the money being spent. Chris Hummer wrote about this. More money is being spent NIL-wise than it ever has been before in college football because, well, there's going to be a new revenue stream for these teams to tap into in 6 months when the revenue share comes down. So obviously teams are being aggressive right now, but I think the market obviously dictates what the difference is between a caliber starter and a depth guy. And I'll tell you this, the margin is thin, man. Just going through the rankings, you go down the list, and I was talking to a team last night, who was looking in the receiver market, and it's like, hey, for that quality of team, or we're talking about a top 25 team that can push for a college football playoff spot, you got 12 to 15 guys. But those 12 to 15 guys are getting recruited just as heavily by the same type of profile of a program. So, it bottlenecks, and what you're seeing is these prices are being driven up.
I think you nailed it. I mean, it's really just dollars and cents, and it comes down to the financial opportunities that a program is going to obviously give them a leg up over somebody else. But I also look at, the quarterback position especially. We talked about Luke Kromenhoek earlier and picking Mississippi State. Like, again, I don't know if Mississippi State had the highest offer, but if he's deciding between $1 million here or $500,000 here, but for $500,000, maybe I can go work with Jeff Lebby, a quarterback guru essentially, somebody that's going to take my talent to the next level, something that I need. I'm going to take a little less money now, knowing that I'm going to get coached up, which is going to pay off, tenfold in the long run. So I think there's just a balance between looking at the depth chart, the financials, and the coaching, especially because all these guys nitpicking over a couple $100,000 right now. They need to look what's going to put them in the best position long term, because that's where the real money is.
All right, guys, the portal is hot. We got postseason football, high school football, All-American Bowl, UA game. Our Hudson Standish is down there at the Shrine Bowl, covering the Shrine Bowl of the Carolinas. And you can find all of that coverage right here at 247sports.com. Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates as well. Make sure to like and subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube channel while you're at it. Our great team got you covered coast to coast.